Welcome, Blockhead traders. Here at Blockhead Traders, I must inform you that we are not financial professionals. Nothing we say should be considered financial advice. We offer our own thoughts and opinions to you, the viewer, as a point of reference. We expect you to form your own financial opinions and make your own financial decisions. Today is Sunday, July 25th, and this is Blockhead Traders Weekly. In this week's episode, it's just myself, Sprocket888, and we're going to cover a bit about some recent deposits that might have made its way into your bank accounts if you have children from the IRS. Additionally, we're going to air a little bit more of the interview episode from last week with Viper XL007 for a couple of questions that were a little bit too long to be included in last week's episode. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to the Discord channel. You can find a link in the description below. It's an open Discord channel that we run. You're welcome to join. Say hello to myself or any of the other fellow Blockhead traders. Give feedback on what you like, don't like about the show. If you'd like us to cover a particular topic, love to hear about that too. So drop in and say hello. So before we hop into this week's episode topic relating to the child tax credit, I need to iterate again that we are not financial professionals. We are not tax advisors. Nothing that you hear in this episode should be considered tax advice or financial advice. This is just our viewpoint and our own opinions on recent changes that will impact United States taxpayers that have children in the tax year of 2021. All right, in this week's episode, we want to talk a little bit about a child tax credit that many of you that have children might have seen starting July 15th as an auto deposit from the IRS into your bank account. Now, some of you might think this is additional stimulus money from the recent COVID legislations that are passed, and to some degree, it is a little bit about that. However, there is a little gotcha that I think all viewers really need to be aware of, and you may or may not quite understand it. So let's talk a little bit about that. So to talk through this, I came up with an example here. We're going to assume that you are a viewer with 2 children and you make less than $150,000 a year for your household. That's you and your spouse, assuming you are married and filing jointly. So in most years, a filing like this would constitute about a $2,000 tax credit per child. So at 2 children, you would receive about a $4,000 tax credit on your taxes. Now remember, that is a credit and not a deduction. So whatever your taxes are that you owe, you get to remove $4,000 from what you owe from this tax credit. Now this is the same that it's been in all the years prior to this year of 2021 taxes. There's a slight change to the credit for the 2021 year only. And this is an additional $1,000 credit on top of the $2,000 child tax credit. Now, this $1,000 credit, you must be filing jointly with less than $150,000 if you're filing jointly to be eligible for this extra $1,000. The $2,000 goes with the regular eligibility, which I believe is somewhere above $400,000 when filing jointly to be eligible for that $2,000 credit. So what's actually happening with these bank account payments that you're receiving is what they did was they used your information from either 2019 or 2020, whichever the IRS had. Most people, that probably was 2020 if you filed your taxes on time. So they took your 2020 return and determined what your eligibility would be in 2021, provided all your information stayed the same. So they then took your child tax credit, so $2,000 plus the extra $1,000, assuming you're eligible for it. In our example, you are. And your total child tax credit that you will receive in 2021 would be $6,000. So then what they did is they decided to pay half of that now to you in your bank account over 6 months. So you take that $6,000, cut it in half, so that's $3,000, and divide that over 6 months to get a payment of about $500 a month. So to recap, if you are married, filed jointly, less than $150,000 household income and you have two children, you will be receiving $500 payment in your bank account on the 15th of every month from July 15th to December 15th. Now, there's a catch. Like I mentioned, this is your already anticipated tax credit for 2021, which means when you go to file in 2022 for your 2021 taxes, 50% of your child tax credit will not be available to you because the IRS already paid it out to you in advance. What that means is if you happen to have your IRS federal withholding taking into account your anticipated child tax credit each year, you will likely have about a $3,000 tax deficit, which means your tax bill when you file for 2021 taxes in the spring of 2022, you could end up owing money. Now, there are a couple things you can do. One, you can understand this impact now and make adjustments to your federal withholding so that you can withhold additional funds to cover this anticipated gap. Or you can visit the IRS website and you can actually opt out of the monthly deposits from the IRS of your tax credit. If you opt out, they basically will not be paying you your taxes in your credit in advance, and that money will be available when you file your 2021 taxes. Now, this is something I think a lot of viewers don't wholly understand because the government has been sending out different stimulus checks for various reasons and things like that. And all of that money to this point has not been an advance payment of any kind. So you're likely to think, oh, this is probably just some extra stimulus money. This is wonderful. And you will be sad come the spring when you go to file and realize that the money you received now in 2021 was actually just an advance payment from the government. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and air a little bit more of the interview between Viper XL and myself from last week's episode. This content was a little bit too long to fit into last week's episode, and I'd like to go ahead and put it into this week's episode, get a little bit more of the viewpoint of myself and Viper's trading habits, background, thinking styles like that. So enjoy. Yeah, so another kind of thing that I've kind of been thinking about and kind of going through my mind is really my views on the stock market, investing and trading, and how it's kind of changed over the years. Um, I know for myself, kind of growing up, the stock market, it was something I heard about on the news. At my grandparents' house, we'd pick up the paper and, I remember my grandpa kind of looking through the paper to see how GE stock was doing. He was an employee of GE back in the day, probably had a ton of retirement in GE. And I remember him kind of mentioning things here and there just as when I was a kid. And he kind of showed me the pages in the back of the paper where different stocks actually printed their closing prices each day. But for the most part, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to the market or things like that. I say kind of my first exposure was when I finally got my first kind of full-time job, and you started setting up or working with your 401k in different investments, and for the longest time I kind of was of the impression that, oh, stock market, that's tricky business, and that's where everybody kind of goes and they can lose all their money and it's super dangerous. And my money is best served probably in a certificate deposit or savings account or something. And that's you just kind of got to work and save your money and build up your savings account and open up your different CDs or different savings products like that. And I remember kind of going through my first 401k choices and feeling really overwhelmed about the different things to pick there, and was I picking the right thing or not picking the right thing. And that kind of led me into my first kind of, well, I should try to figure some of this stuff out. And I opened up my first brokerage account, traded a couple equities here and there. Um, and I never really made any money, never really lost any money. Just kind of went sideways for probably 2, 3 years, and finally decided that this is silly. There's no way that I can really ever figure this market out. And kind of wrote it off. And I continued to pour money into 401k because I kind of thought, oh, well, this is just a great way to save for retirement. So, I'll take this percentage of my income and I'll just keep dumping it into a 401k. And then just a couple years ago, I'd say about probably 2 years, 2, 3 years ago, I started kind of looking as my oldest kind of went to college and taking a look back at just my savings strategy in general. Um, and I just thought, maybe there is something to this trading and investing. And I thought I better take a second look at it. And so I really started kind of focusing in on different resources I found online about investing, saving for retirement, which led me to different trading and things like that. And I kept hearing about all of these people that trade options, Um, and every time I'd ever heard the word options before that, it was always associated with, oh, they lost $10,000, they lost $100,000, they lost their entire savings and brokerage account. And I just thought that was just a super dangerous thing, and I needed to stay away from it. And I don't even know what it was, but one day I just said, let me just check this out, because I don't understand how something so dangerous could be so popular and people be so successful at it. Like Warren Buffett actually trades a lot of options, sells a lot of options. And so I really kind of started digging into that option trading and option selling, and really trying to figure out what the heck is an option, and how do you trade it and what does it do. And I really kind of started honing in on one, successful trades, which really boosts your interest. It's a lot harder to stay interested in something that sucks money out than to stay interested in something where you can make a little bit of money. And so that's when I really just kind of dove off the deep end into learning stuff about the market. And in the past 3 years, 3, 4 years, I've really started to come to the realization that the markets aren't as mysterious and creepy and difficult as I was kind of always told, in all my learnings. I mean, they're not easy. They're not like printing money type, but with enough focus and kind of learning, you don't need a special degree to kind of dig into it. In fact, a lot of financial advisors and stuff out there, I mean, there's good ones, there's people that know what they're doing, but a lot of that just comes from experience. And so my whole attitude about I could actually do this and manage money myself, I just started kind of building on that and just digging into more and more and more learning. And so, yeah, now my view on the market is actually quite positive. Today, it's not this scary, nebulous thing out there anymore. It's something that everyday people can actually get in, and with enough learning, which isn't tons. I mean, we're not talking about night school for 2.5 years to learn this. I mean, I'm talking an hour a day for a few months, just kind of soaking up information and knowledge. uh, you really can kind of understand what's going on, and start piecing together a viable strategy that can actually net you way more gains than those savings account and certificates of deposit that you might otherwise be inclined to look for.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any kind of, I don't know how long you've kind of been dabbling around markets, or if your views changed through the years. Um, what
Yeah,
do you
no, I
think?
mean, it definitely, I mean, had a similar progression as far as stock market. It's this dry, boring, untouchable thing that nobody likes, but everybody's addicted to, or that sort of thing. Um, that stigma for the longest time, fading into the accessibility of it. And I don't, it's hard to know what of that, is part of everybody's story versus part of our story, our generational story. Because I mean, I would like to think the market as a whole has become insanely more accessible today than it was 15 years ago, and then certainly beyond that. I mean, when it was more of an investment vehicle than a trading vehicle, um, and that accessibility, I mean, it parallels, like what we just said about YouTube and learning and videos and accessibility of that information. Um, I mean, you can blink and trade 100 options or whatever yourself. You don't have to call it into your broker or anything. So I feel like to me that accessibility has, I'd like to think that it's a newer thing. Like I said, maybe it's just my ignorance for being new to it, but I would like to think that's a newer thing. Um, and then realizing that potential, tapping into that, content creator community, like you said, of YouTube channels. And I mean, when I first started and realized I don't know how to buy anything and I just lost a bunch of money on oil, I was like, all right, I need to slow down. I've faded back into an investment mindset of like, all right, here's a few companies that I want to hold long term. Let me just do that. And then there was a period of like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I was doing it a little bit before then too, where I would just put CNBC or something on in the background as background noise while I worked. I wasn't fully paying attention, but just wanted to hear the lingo, wanted to hear what they look at, and I mean, at the end of the day, most of the stuff on there is just like any channel, it's not super deep as far as content, but it got me started into thinking of, gave me the buzzwords of like, what is this or what is that? And then, settled into some YouTube channels, and would just watch those. Still at this point, not touching the market. Just let me just watch this, and then just Pandora's box opens from there. Of, well, that didn't look so bad. That made sense. That mitigated that risk or whatever. Um, so I think in that sense, um, the accessibility of it has changed greatly over the years, and continues to be one of its biggest assets currently. I think going forward, I think we have another transition potentially going on, potentially because of that accessibility, where I don't know that the market will ever look like it used to, because that door is open now, and you know broker or fees are zero. And I think the way big firms are going to have to compete is through competitive mutual funds or ETFs or things like that. And then we have this complete unknown of the main stock trading, and what does that look like, because that appears to be a thing that's going to be around for a while because of that accessibility. um, I wouldn't say it's good or bad, it's just completely different, and going to be very interesting to see how that settles into its role going forward.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point that you brought up as far as the expansion of different technologies and the kind of ease of access and low barrier to entry of trading. That definitely is true. It's gotten a whole lot easier. Um, do you find yourself when you kind of surfed a lot of those resources? Um, how do you sort through the gimmicky, clickbaity type videos? Because I feel there's kind of two classes of videos out there when it comes to learning different trading things. There's the quick clickbaity, uh, follow this and turn $1,000 into $100,000.
Yeah.
And then there's another class of videos that is a little more boring, and less glamorous. But talk a little bit about how you kind of navigated some of that.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is probably hard to teach and more of an instinct. But I mean, it does sort of come back to, because there is a reality attached to this, which I did run into a couple times, where the YouTube algorithm and things like that, that, people who are making a living on their channel have to have clickbaity thumbnails and things like that. So that's muddying the waters a lot. I mean, usually you could avoid you could avoid the crap videos because they look like crap videos and just go to somebody else. And so, um, but certainly the fundamental foundation of the old sounds too good to be true, probably is too good to be true, that sort of thing. But ultimately, when the thumbnails all kind of blended together and you couldn't really gain much about a video from the thumbnail anymore, I just would start watching it. And so there was one channel in particular. um, I mean, I'd plug it, but I forget the name right now. But it was right right at the start of the GameStop stuff. He had a fairly clickbaity title, um, called, it was something along the lines of uh, Nokia to the moon, NOK to the moon, question mark. And I was like, oh, come on. But also, I bought some Nokia. So yeah, is this happening? So, uh, and I watched it, and it turned out that it was the classic example of clickbaity thumbnail, really solid content. And I mean, how I use VWAP in previous videos, how I use anchored VWAP in previous videos comes a lot from some analysis he did on the Nokia MAME spike. Um, because and the way he broke, so he's an investor, not necessarily a trader. And so he would go deep into fundamental, he would go deep into reports, and he would go pull up all kinds of stuff. And so then, like, that immediately starts building that credibility of like, okay, so I want to watch you. I don't do investment moves, but I've learned a lot of analysis from him. um, and some other channels, it's about watching it, and at the end of the day, through their flashy presentation or their personality, I mean, motives are going to come out, in the nuanced details. At least for me, they do. And so I try to, if somebody starts talking real loud and yelling at me, and they, are like, I mean, they're talking about how much money you're going to make, about, like, I mean, it starts to, maybe I take it for granted, maybe I take my filters for granted, but I feel like I look and weed out a lot of that stuff. And what I look for is explanations, not just do this. Um, so I don't want instructions. I want detailed explanation of why. I mean, and that's something that I take into all kinds of aspects of life. Like, show me why, show me how. So that's at the top of my list. Um, kind of like we've talked before about successes and failures. Like, don't just tell me this is all going to be rainbows and butterflies. Like, um, you know, if you're watching a channel and they never once mention a loss, or they never once mention risk, and it's just all like, then they're just getting views. They're just there to tell you what you want to hear, so you come back for more. So kind of balance those sorts of things. And I'd say I've found probably three or four solid channels that I go to very regularly. Um, and I'm excited to see videos of, and it could be stuff I don't even care about, but now I like their personality and explanation style, and I just like learning from them. So, have you used many YouTube channels, or have you filtered in a similar way?
Yeah, I'd say pretty similar. I'm a pretty questioning kind of person in general. So whenever anybody makes some bold claim about whatever it is, my first instinct is to doubt them. So it's always, oh, that's nice, but prove it to me. And I've kind of used similar gauges to you when I kind of navigated a lot of the YouTube videos. As soon as a video kind of jumped in, I kind of tried to steer away from some of the flash, but Like you said, there is good content behind some of the flash, but if I start kind of skipping through a video and there's no real why, or kind of, maybe it's the engineer in me, no detailed kind of meat behind it, and it's more, I did this, I'm amazing, you should do this too, follow this. I really kind of steered away from that. I also typically steered away from anybody that had any backing of any service that they had, not because I didn't trust their service. It's just I don't really, I'm a very, I don't know, untrusting individual. And so when there's an ulterior motive behind it, then I kind of question, are you saying this because this is true, or are you saying this because it benefits you on some other end?
Yeah.
Um, and I also kind of did kind of cross checks, if you would. And once I found a concept that I really liked, or I thought I liked, I would then try to dig into that concept, and I would specifically take the other side of that concept and try to look for the negatives. Like when I got into selling options, and I saw all these great things about selling options, I'm like, well, there has to be another side. And so I would Google, why is option selling dangerous? How can I lose my money option selling? And that's kind of how I also kind of balance the yin and the yang, if you would. For me, kind of the turning point in YouTube channels, and I'll mention it here, but this is not a plug for them. Was Tasty Trade. They're out there kind of championing retail investing and retail trading, and I was super super skeptical of their content because it was so all over YouTube, like everywhere, and they
Yeah.
have an entire business model behind it. Um, but the videos were all based on this like research. They would take a idea or a concept, and they would kind of back test it and as their theory, and see how certain things panned out. And they presented all of their information. They basically gave you all the criteria. You could go check it yourself. And I actually did a few times at first to be like, are you just saying this, or is there really something here to this? And that's honestly where I got a lot of the content and the background that I built upon. Um, yeah, I don't like single sourcing information, and so I basically would take those same concepts and ideas, and I'd look for other people kind of teaching and talking about the same thing. So
Yeah.
I think pretty similar structure to what you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did look it up just as a couple plugs. The popular investor was the guy that I was thinking of. That he's obviously an investor, but he had a couple flashy thumbnails, but he has a ton of good foundation behind it. Um, and Humbled Trader is the other one that I watch. She does a ton of day trading stuff, so I've learned a lot of day trading techniques and stuff from her. But along the same lines of like multi-sourcing, no matter what channel it is, whoever I'm listening to, tell me. I take it as, okay, that's your experience, that's what you do. That doesn't mean it's a golden rule, or that'll always, and so then I look it up or test it out myself in a small thing, or if it's an idea, just watch a stock ticker and see, did this react how their knowledge prepared me to think it would react. And then I just grow it from there into my own thing. It's not like some sort of, I have to do exactly what they did. It's, everything is information gathering and then applying it through your own uh, constructive and careful thought.
Yeah, humble trader. I've watched that lady before. Uh,
Yeah,
she's that's a borderline flashy channel.
it is. But I mean, so far, her stuff has checked out. I
Yep.
mean, but that's definitely her niche of like, I mean, her video description, her channel description is, "Are you tired of all the Lambos and luxury day trading ads?" So she definitely leans into that um, for her brand. But yeah, I mean, she has sound advice that um, I then work into my what applies to me. There's some stuff she does that I'm like, nope, that's not for me. I'm not going to try it. And that's what all of these channels are for me is give me some ideas and then I'll run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, she's one of the ones that I would say kind of highlight that flashiness, but there's good content behind there.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I actually kind of trust some of the information she gives, not because it also checks out when I kind of look into it, is she's not afraid of showing you when she screws up. She has actually quite a few videos of actually to the point of like over flashy, like I just lost $50,000 and it's awesome. Um, but yeah, she's definitely she's one of them, and yeah, that's actually a great point when you mentioned to just soak it up as a data point.
Yeah.
For me, that's definitely true. I don't think I've emulated anybody that I've ever really followed as a copycat kind of role. You know, I've tried to learn in principle what's behind their thinking, what's behind what they're doing, and apply that uh, to my account and my strategy. And I find that's a much more productive way to build yourself up than to just say, "What are you doing?" Okay, I'll do the same thing. What are you doing? I'm doing it too. Um, you know, you can learn that way, but at some point, you know, I don't know. It's the if you teach a man to fish analogy there. You know,
Yeah.
just keep giving them fish. Well, that's great, but you really got to learn out how to go and fish for yourself as well. And this brings us to the end of this week's episode of Blockhead Traders Weekly. Remember, check out the link in the description below to the Discord channel to hop in, say hello, maybe suggest a future topic you'd like us to cover. Leave some comments below in this video. Let us know what you want to hear about for future shows and upcoming topics. And until next time, good luck this week, have fun, and remember, think outside the block.